Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Hannah. I'm the project manager of this synthesis project. We're so excited to have you all. We thought it could be nice to start with just a quick introduction of you, so the folks on the call have a little bit of context about who else is joining. So if you just want to do a quick unmute and just say your name, your organizational affiliation, that would be fantastic. I can't see. All right, Brian, will you start us off?
Sure thing. Thanks, Hannah. My name is Brian Lawrence. I'm the Executive Director of the Westmoreland County Redevelopment Authority and Land Bank.
All right, maybe Ashley next.
Sure. I'm Ashley Vidal. I'm the Communications Manager for the Westmoreland County Redevelopment Authority and Land Bank.
Maybe Christine, then Joy.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christine Durock, and I'm the Borough Manager for Sharpsburg Borough. Prior to this, I worked for a housing and community development firm and got on this project because Taylor was my intern last year. So I'm excited to be here.
This is Joy Ruff, Local Government Academy. Thank you for the invitation.
Maybe Augie next.
Good morning, Augie Carlino, President and Chief Executive Officer, Rivers of Steel National Heritage Area.
Great, thank you so much. Jordan, do you want to go?
Good morning, everybody. Jordan Paletto. I serve on the board of the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County and teach some classes there at CMU on economic development and organizational management.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. And finally, we have Becca.
Hi, everyone. Becca Simon here. I'm the project manager of policy and land stewardship at Ground Strategies. Excited to be here. Apologies, I'm off camera because I'm traveling. Thanks.
Okay, I think those are all the folks we have that are on right now. Hopefully more can join as we're continuing our presentation, but with that, we will go ahead and get started. So our group, Jada, will you come here for just 1 second? Sorry, I'm using a loaner computer and I just want to make sure.
Loaner? It's just mine. What do you need?
When I scroll forward, nothing's happening.
You just got it. There we go.
Okay,
Cool.
okay, so sorry. So I think you all are probably aware, but we are working with Westmoreland County, the Redevelopment Authority and Land Bank, and we are working specifically to look at making recommendations for vacant, abandoned, and damaged properties and lots in the county. And this is our midterm presentation. We'll do a final that you all will be invited to, but this is just to give you an update on what we have done so far and what we're looking to do in the future. So today, I'm going to give you a quick project overview and scope of what we're planning on doing. Then Jada's going to talk about the context and background research we've done. Taylor's going to talk about some maps. Ong is going to talk about market research and data analysis that she's been doing. Dennis is going to give us some ideas and strategies for financial planning. Then Bobby's going to finish up with our community engagement updates, which we're very excited about. So just a quick project overview. This is our capstone project for the Heinz College. So this is really to show what we've been learning over these 2 years of our master's program. We have lots of policy students, and then we have one MISM student, which stands for Information Security and Management, Information Systems and Management, very tech focused, which is great. We have a faculty project advisor, Bob Graddick, who is fantastic. I'm sure he'll be popping on here, maybe just say a few words at a certain point, but, and our client is the Westmoreland County RALB. So just a quick context, the county was granted lots of millions of dollars in ARPA funding, and our role on this project is to help the county determine what the best use and most efficient allocation of these funds would be in looking at reinvesting in property in Westmoreland County. And you may notice on this call this morning, we are using the term vacant, abandoned, and damaged property, or VAD, instead of blighted properties or blight. And we had a conversation together as a team about being intentional about our language use, and we have been reading some literature that suggests that maybe using blight and blighted properties reinforces some stigma and views of power. And so as a team, we're choosing to use BAD. We encourage you to join us, but we just wanted to make that clear at the beginning that for this project, that's what we're going to be talking about. So there are a few things that this project will not do, which we thought would be helpful to lay out for you. So instead of focusing on the entire county of Westmoreland, we decided to focus specifically on the city of Monessen, 2 qualified census tracts in the city in particular, which will give us more detailed and specific recommendations. And to that extent, we're not going to be choosing specific tenants for this redevelopment and reinvestment, but giving broad recommendations as to what could be on these lots. And similarly, we're not going to be doing a detailed pro forma or financial plan, but recommendations for subsidies and different funding sources that could be used. We have a lot of really cool deliverables and we keep adding them. We keep thinking like, oh, it'd be so cool if we talked about X, Y, and Z. So right now, the deliverables that we have, we're going to start with a community survey that we're going to distribute to the citizens of Monessen to get their feedback on what they want to see in their community. And related, we're going to be doing a community engagement event in the area. We have 2 sorts of online maps related to the GIS work that we've been doing, which we're really excited about. And we're also going to be handing over a data management plan to the county with information about the data sources that we have been using, metadata, and the ways in which we're using the data. So hopefully this project can continue long after we leave. And then there are some things that are specific to the capstone, like we're going to have to turn in a final report, 2 presentations, one of which we're doing today. Woo! And then we hope to finally turn in a playbook or white paper for municipalities to give a better idea of how they could redevelop in the future. So with that, after each of the sections, we're hoping to hear from you about any thoughts or questions, concerns you have about what we presented so we can really gather your feedback. You all have very valuable perspectives that we want to hear. So with that, do you have any questions about the project overview or scope that we can answer?
I'd like just to make a comment on your thought, your intentionality, as you mentioned, on how you're defining blight and using those words and not using them. I think that's really great. So I don't like acronyms. I always say local government academy. I don't even say LGA, and it's just an acronym thing. But right. I am really impressed by what you guys have taken on and the thought you've given into it. Very impressed.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. We also say vacant, abandoned, and damaged property here, but we know that for some people, the reason that they choose blight is because it's just like easier to say. So yes, I totally understand what you're saying about acronyms. The meaning kind of gets lost, but thank you for saying that. We really appreciate it. And we've thought a lot about it as a team, and it's nice to hear that validated. Okay. If you think of something later, you can throw it in the chat, or we'll have more time at the end for lingering questions. But with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Jada, who's gonna do some context and background information for us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So as Hannah mentioned, I am the contextual lead, and I'm just gonna kind of get into the context that I've been able to gather so far through research, through the literature. And while this is not visible because it's just entirely too small, I'm just going to switch over to the software that it actually is a lot more visible in. Oops, I'm moving things around. So we're going to start here with the problem at hand, and that's the orange and red elements here on this diagram. And so bad, vacant properties, abandoned properties, and damaged properties, or out of code properties is kind of what I'm considering damaged in this case, is the problem, right? And so we are looking at how these 3 elements on the bottom in orange, tax delinquency, excessive publicly owned parcels, and lack of tax revenue have contributed to bad. And within each of these elements, there are so many other smaller things that I could break off, but ideally what we're looking at here is how they contribute to the issues up in red. And so I've actually, as Hannah was mentioning, I do like the idea of adding this as a deliverable, because within this software, you can kind of click and I can go in and write a description on how the things are connected and go back to the sources that I've read. And that is ideally a product or deliverable that I'd like to additionally give to Westmoreland RALB. And so here we're looking at the problem at large, and I'm going to move us down into the stakeholders and some of their attributes. So I think that that's the next element in terms of local government implementation of fixing the problems in red. And so we're looking at Westmoreland County, the Nehemiah Project, Monessen City Council, and Monessen community members. And so in terms of hierarchy, these are organized by colors of blue, and the darker the blue, the more impact is felt, right? And so we're looking at community members in particular and seeing how they are connecting with their community, what factors are contributing to them not being able to enjoy the community currently, and what can change once solutions are presented. And so in the case of community members, we're looking at the fact that Monessen used to be the size of 20,000, and now it's just under 7,000. 76.3% of the people actually own their housing, which is really great. And so how can we keep that number high and even improve it if possible? With an aging population, how does that contribute to our VAD up at the top? And also looking at like how historic job loss, given that Monessen is a legacy city, how does that contribute to VAD, and what can be done about that? Looking at how social determinants of health are at risk, and how median income factors into the sort of market that we'll get to hear about later from a few of my other colleagues. And so on the side, I do have Monessen industry presence, HUD, and the school district there. I do think that they are some really important stakeholders as well. That may not be directly linked to the issues, but I do think that they, through some way, somehow, that I'll get to get into, are also connected. And so down at the bottom, we then get into the solution-oriented strategies. So that's prevention, remediation, and redevelopment. Within these, there are so many other elements that I could be adding, but I just kind of focus on these for now. There's property maintenance education for residents, for those people that are still owning their homes, that may be out of code, that may need some upkeep. How can we better educate those residents on what resources are available to them in terms of progressive code enforcement? How can the city begin to look at code enforcement, and what needs to change for homes to be up to code and safe for residents? In terms of remediation, keeping people in their homes or determining if they need to be demolished. That's essentially what's happening here. So we have tax abatement helping residents. Also demolition being this next step if that's just not possible. But ideally, this leads into crime reduction, fire hazard reduction, which would either keep the property safe and keep people in them, or lead to redevelopment, where we have demolished this sort of unsafe material or buildings that are on the property and can get into parcel reuse. And so that's a very general overview of what I've been able to come up with so far, given some readings that I've gone through, which we will see here. And there are so many more texts to get to. I think that, the literature is robust, which is awesome. And I get excited about reading it and getting into the context. And so I'm looking forward to building that out some more, getting into the connections and context. So thank you all so much. Are there any questions about what I've presented so far? Great.
Yeah, this is Rick. I'm sorry for entering late, so you may have covered this, Jada, but I don't see, well, let me back up. I have a hypothesis about Monessen, that if we can develop new locations for jobs, that will help a great deal. So where do you see the idea of, if you will, job development leading to people actually who may take possession of houses or revamp them or whatever? But at any rate, how do you see that job opportunities in Monessen changing or included in your model?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm referencing the city plan here. I do remember kind of going over the fact that a lot of people that live in Monessen don't actually work in Monessen. And so maybe being able to look at, and Taylor will get into the parcels for downtown and kind of what that looks like. But I think that there are a lot of buildings downtown that could be used for industry, for different businesses that might be opening up within Monessen in the future. And so looking at like that within redevelopment, but then also connecting that to potential job opportunities for Monessen community members through opening businesses in the future, or even looking at how industry that's currently in the county or within Monessen may be contributing to actually getting people jobs, not so much in the industries that are there, but in what it's connected to with the businesses that are currently in Monessen as it stands. I do think that that's something that I definitely want to get into more now that you mention it, because it's really important in terms of the local economy, and that gets us back to taxes and things like that. And so I'm interested in figuring that out, and I'm happy to get that into this diagram. But I definitely see the connection between what I've found so far and figuring out job creation in the future.
If I could, Rick, based on our experiences in Westmoreland County, many of our legacy cities still have quite a bit of jobs. They still have lots of jobs, but there's that spatial mismatch between worker training and capability to work in the industries that are in that place. Obviously, it's a mobile society. I would add that, most of what's left in downtown, the buildings there won't support business because they're in terrible shape. So there's a spatial aspect to all of this. I just did a quick on the map analysis that showed there's 1,400 jobs in all of Monessen, and they tend to be focused in the downtown. We've seen this in other places. For instance, the city of Jeanette, there's a major employer there. It's got something like 2,000 jobs, and only about 2% of their workforce actually lives in Jeanette. And so there are these interrelated issues of the school system, quality of life, that also contribute to that. So I would note that, a lot of our legacy cities still have industry and employment. It's that spatial mismatch problem that I think we end up seeing more often.
I think you're right on point, Brian. And so I think I guess, and by the way, the model to date is terrific. There's all kinds of factors in there, but in the end, I think what's going to determine people's demand for housing and so on is that they find the place attractive. They can work outside Monessen, but they want to live in Monessen. And so when I think about sort of the regional economy, how do you make Monessen the place that you want to buy that abandoned house, revamp it, and live there while you maybe work in Charleroi or something, across the river? But yeah, it's a big part of the overall system, I guess, is the conclusion. And I see Augie with his hand up, so I'll shut up.
Yeah, Augie, you can go ahead.
I'm curious, Jada, population loss and a correlation to poor school districts. Did you all look at that as a part of this? Monessen's probably got one of the worst school district ratings in the Commonwealth. People, a lot of times, families obviously are looking for schools. So, how does their population loss maybe compare to surrounding communities in Westmoreland County?
Yeah, I actually have come across a little bit of literature on the school district. That's exactly why I included it within the diagram that I showed before.
Oh, I missed it. I apologize.
No, that's okay. It's not actually connected yet because I want to make sure that the connection is clear. And there may be some elements that are missing currently within this diagram that shows exactly what you're saying. That there is this population loss, and that is affecting the school district. And that could also tie into job creation with teachers and things along that line. So yes, in the long term, I absolutely want to get into how the city's school district fits into this larger picture of redevelopment.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll add that to our research.
Okay, we have a question from Becca.
Okay.
Becca says, has there been research done around code encouragement rather than code enforcement?
No, code encouragement has not come up for me so far, but I will have to look into that. That actually seems less forceful, and might actually be really, really great. And yeah, so Becca, if you wanted to add anything to that now, feel free to, but I'm really interested in looking into code encouragement.
Absolutely. I'm actually heading to like a session with Center for Community Progress, who's been doing a lot of research on code encouragement. And I see you have their blight report for Pittsburgh. They've been doing a lot of like work with other organizations trying to understand how to like actually support residents to do code encouragement and actually like sustain their properties and find incentives to actually do so. So I'll ask around when I'm actually at this conference later today and see if they have like any direct resources for y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
We have another question from Joy. Joy says, detailed reuse strategies will drive economic development. Does the VAD encompass residential, commercial, and industrial areas?
Absolutely, yes. And Taylor will kind of get into that when we see the maps and what parcels we have information on so far. But absolutely, it's not just residential, it's commercial and industrial, just given how interconnected it all is. And so, yeah, we'll begin to build this out more for industry and for the commercial aspects of Monessen as well. Thanks, Joy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I know just this is what makes bad or blighted properties such a sticky wicket, is that there's all these systems at play here. And so, yeah, I would just reiterate what Joy had mentioned in the chat, that it's a very complex thing. And, you know, some person's going to say, wait, there's this other piece and there's this other piece. And there, you know, it is really that complex. So trying to graphically depict it, hats off for going after that.
Thank you. I am a very visual learner, so this was really helpful to me, and hopefully it can continue to be helpful in the future. So yeah, awesome. Okay, for time's sake, they were going to get on into Taylor's section of this, but thank you all so much for the questions. They're really helpful. Yeah. There we go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor. So I'm both the GIS lead and the data manager. So I'll start by talking a little bit about data management because it's not so much in this midterm presentation. So as data manager, what I'll be doing is working with the team as well as like kind of particularly with the data folks on how we're collecting our data, making sure our sources are good, making sure we're keeping up on our metadata, even though everyone hates doing that. And so essentially at the end, what we're going to have is this document that lists out all the data sources we have, as well as sort of like what all the different variables mean and how these variables are useful. And so the reason that we're doing that is that, you know, we could just craft our data in the way that we save it in a way that's just helpful for us to get our project done, get the sign off and graduate, never look at it again. But we really do want our project and the data that we're using to be useful to the community after our project is done. We don't just want this to be a 3-month thing. We want it to be useful into the future as well. So that's why we'll be handing over this document that tries to really explain and make clear what data we have collected and provided. So that would be the data management thing, which is largely going to be something that we do at the end. But so for today, I'm going to show you some maps. So this is obviously a map of Monessen. So there are 2 ARPA qualified census tracts that we're going to be focusing on with our recommendations. Each of those census tracts has 2 block groups within it. I just realized that says block group 4 and that's a typo. This is block groups 1 and 2 within census tracts 8052 and 8054. And so basically this table just gives a little bit of information about each of those block groups. Essentially what we have here is relatively high rates of poverty as well as non-white populations within these census tracts. And so Westmoreland RALB did give us this really great data set of the properties that have been identified as vacant, abandoned, or damaged in some capacity. There are 335 properties that are in that data set, and so I've mapped them here. However, I will say that only 93 of those parcels have data about current conditions. So essentially what that means is some parcels have just kind of been listed in there, but we don't have all the information about it. And so that's something that moving forward, we want to try to really enrich that data set and get more information about the properties that are listed. But so as I go through these slides and list like X number have this condition, that's going to be out of those 93 that we have information on, and not the total 335. So moving ahead, of those 93 we have data on, 58 parcels have some kind of damage. So this could be things from like a broken window, or the curb out front is damaged, all the way to like sagging foundation, holes in the roof, things like that. And it also includes things like fire damage and water damage. And so that ties into what Jada was talking about with prevention. These are issues where the homes, or not even necessarily homes, and I'll get into that, but where the properties have gone out of code and they're just sitting there out of code as of this time. Additionally, 48 parcels have been identified as dangerous or hazardous. So dangerous meaning like there are things that immediately cause dangers. I think one of the things listed was like wells that people could fall into. So they pose a danger to the public around it, as well as environmental hazards. So things that cause a public safety risk, public health risk, I should say. And so there are a decent number of those as well that also tie into the issues of just preventing these out of code properties. Additionally, 46 parcels have been tax delinquent for 2+ years. So having an idea of which of these properties are tax delinquent does give us a view of sort of what we're looking at with these parcels, as far as what the ownership looks like and how invested someone may or may not be. Additionally, there are some legal things that we're going to look into as far as when we get into the remediation and redevelopment stages of our recommendations. Knowing which parcels are tax delinquent is of course helpful. There are quite a few more that are more recently tax delinquent. But 2+ years, we have 46. So touching on Joy's question from earlier, 54 of the parcels we have data on are residential, while 8 are commercial. So in this visual, the yellow are the residential and the blue are the commercial. And so basically we have a variety of types of parcels that we can look at. So they're going to have different sorts of recommendations associated with them based on where they are and the types of facilities that they have. And so moving forward, there's a lot of things that we want to get more data on, particularly with enriching that data set, but we also want to look at which parcels are public versus privately owned, getting an idea of existing green spaces, fire and crime data. There was a survey done in the city of Monessen that they called the Blight Survey of 2021, I believe. And they had some great fire and crime data. So we'd want to get some more updated data from the fire department and the police force. We also want to get an idea of zoning, as well as visualizations of our recommendations that will come later. So what this has been is largely just a snapshot of what we're currently looking at, but there will also be some maps in our final presentation that show what our recommendations will lead to. And so with that, do you have any questions, suggestions, things like that about the maps that we have?
I would add some context to some of this. So as Taylor pointed out, the county planning department, and I think it was 2018, it might have been a little bit earlier than that. So we're sort of, there's a bit of time frame that has gone by, and a lot of properties that might have been in a fair condition are now in a poor condition. But in 2018, the county planning department did a complete inventory of the entire municipality. So every single parcel was rated on a good, fair, poor spectrum. And when you're doing, something like 3,000 or 4,000 parcels in that process, you don't have a lot of time to go through like a really detailed checklist of every single thing. What we've been asking the city of Monessen to do is to complete those more detailed blight reports that we call them, so that we know for sure that something is vacant. We know for sure that it's meeting the qualifications that we need to have for eligibility for a demolition project. So those numbers are likely to grow in terms of the things that have got damage on them. I don't think I don't have a good way of sharing the photos in a aggregate sense to the team at Carnegie Mellon, but you can see pretty quickly if that a lot of these homes have been fire burnouts, roofs are missing. It's pretty severe. So just pointing out that number will likely grow as we continue to make progress on those more detailed investigations.
Yeah, thanks so much for that context, Brian. Yeah, we know that when we're looking with vacant and damaged properties, just those circumstances can change so quickly, and we are mindful of that. So we know that this data is going to be hard to get. And so we're just hoping to do whatever we can to get as good of a snapshot of spring of 2023 as we can. All right, if no one else has any other questions, so I've just given you kind of an idea of the current situation and what some prevention strategies might help us alleviate, and how remediation might be determined. And now we'll go ahead with some of my colleagues to talk about redevelopment. Hello, everybody. I'm Ang, and now I will introduce my parts as for the data analysis as well as market research. First of all, I will introduce this part's data sources. We mainly scrap data from the reference using Python build soup library and then do parser on HTML files. And finally, we scrapped over 316 publicly available on-sale housing properties in Westmoreland County and 13 in Monessen City with the zip code, along with 27 features, including the cell type, the price, the lot size, and the year built. You can have a look at this graph to see all the 27 features. And based on the data we scrap from the reference website, we can do some comparison of the real-time housing sales in Monessen and the Westmoreland County. You can see from this two graph, the housing price ranges from 13,000 to 200,000. It's fluctuated greatly and is lower than the state level. And then for the room and bus number situations, we can see from the red graph that the room and bus numbers are cluttered in the lower left part of the whole county. And then based on the open source data from the reference website, we can give an overview of the market situation. You can see that the median sale price is $88,500. And the median days, I mean the circulation circle on market is 16.3 days. And the home price were down 24.4% compared to 2022. You can have a look at the sale price of single family houses in the Monessen city during the 5 recent years. It varies a lot and fluctuated without specific patterns. And then based on the data set situation, we decided to do some predictive tasks. As for here, we designed two classification jobs. The first one is to the binary classification. We decided to train model based on the historical housing data we scrapped from the reference website. And then we will assess whether those VAD property is suitable for sale based on selected features like location, like school district, like the lot size. All the other features are visible to us now. We regard this as the independent variable, and then the sale period as a target variable. And then the result of this model is to give it a evaluation like yes or no. It's a binary classification like it's proper for sale or we need to demolish it. And then once the demolish decision is made, we need to do some reconstruction job or the reinvestment jobs. And then we need to evaluate how worthwhile is it based on the ease of the sales ranking. As for this part, we will now to make so decisive decision, rather we will give it a rank from 1 to 5, from extremely easy to sell to extremely hard to sell. We divide it into different level. Upon understanding the predictive tasks, we decided to deploy models on it. Here we have the model selection parts, and after evaluation, we decided to mainly focus on these two model algorithm. The first one, I know this part is somehow boring. I will briefly describe it. As for the ridge regression, it's just like the common regression is so interpretable, and we can eliminate the effects of those unimportant features or as well as of those unrelated features. Like the zip code is now useful for the Monessen city. And we have some data characteristics, like the data contain too many features. Here we see it as a noises because there are really too many uncorrelated features, and we need to filter them out. And as well as the data suffers from the multi-collinearity problems. The variance are large because maybe the price is correlated with the lot size with its location. So it's obvious to observe from the data sets. So we need to deal with these multi-collinearity problems. And then as for this model, it will automatically scale the variables as continuous variable, which have different weightage. So we can see the importance of different features. And the next model is random forest. The random forest can do both classification and regression problems. So it's feasible for this problem. And the data set has both numerical, like the price, and textual features like the address. We can use this random forest model to tackle this problem without do any other data cleaning jobs. And as well as the data sets contain large missing values. So this model is suitable for this data set. And the next step is like to collect more data from the open sources and clients, because we observe that we only scrap 30 data from the website because of its anti-scrapping mechanism. So we need to collect more data from different sources. And then we extract features from the raw data, we train and tune the model, and we examine the model performance and give more detailed housing and market trends, and then provide suggestions for each property to align with our redevelopment suggestion. So any problems here? Any questions for us here?
I would just note that we're like really getting a lot closer to buying some proprietary data from First American. They have that automated valuation model data. They've just got me a quote. I'm waiting for the more formal quote to arrive. I'm hopeful that we can get this before you guys are all done with your project, because I think it would really add, the challenge that you have with scraping is a lot of times, especially in a market like Monessen, where there's not a lot of velocity, right? There's not a lot of turnover in the housing market. You get very small sample sizes to kind of say, okay, we get a better understanding of the housing market based on 27, 10 properties, 5 properties. That makes it difficult. But what an AVM will allow us to do is they do their own magic, if you will, data analysis to identify what would be a good price within a range for practically every property in Monessen, especially the housing prices. Commercial is a totally different animal, but I think it would really add a lot of value. So we're moving forward to get that. I hope we get it again before you guys are done, and we can add it to the model.
Okay, well, cool. Well, it's be more comprehensive, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
that's really a good point.
Yeah. I'm not seeing anything in the chat,
Okay,
but maybe we'll just give it a few more seconds because that was technical. So maybe, I know it took a second for that to sink in for me, so.
okay.
I would add is if there's like any way to hone in on, I think what is a central problem of reinvestment in our communities like this is the appraisal gap. I don't know if there's any way to scrape for that kind of data or if there's any model that could be built to create at least a demonstration of what the appraisal gap is in these census tracts. That might be something to go after. That's the thing that really holds back a lot of investment, especially private investment, is the appraisal gap.
Okay,
Just a suggestion. You might,
okay. A good suggestion, yeah. Okay. I will invest more based on this, based on the
Okay.
direction.
We have a question from Joy.
Okay,
It
cool.
says, are you able to map the sales location and compare that to the VAD location?
Oh, yeah, I try to do that, but from the open source data, we can't exactly map the location because those, those vacant properties are now publicly released in those commercial, housing website. So that's for this part, I guess that. But my idea is try to find these neighbors because they are of the same situation. So maybe we can gain some insights or ideas from those with similar characteristics properties. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah.
All right. Hello, all. My name's Dennis. I am the financial lead. So we're just going to go over some of the initial thoughts that we have based on the other things that have already been stated. The initial overhead strategy of the financial investment aspect is we want to build upon the work that Monessen and Westmoreland County plans already have in sustainable development and understand where those match with community needs. So when we're doing our community kinds of needs assessment, when we're going in the community and doing some of these surveys, the idea is to figure out where those matches are and how we can use the current vacant, abandoned, and properties to match those needs. We want to create a holistic, sustainable, phased approach to land use. As we know, subsidy, grants, funds, they take a while to take in. So we want to make sure that we're creating a phased approach, which makes everything feasible over an extended period of time. And we wanted to identify streams of funding in addition to the ARPA funds, so that we have additional ways to capitalize on the funds the county already has. So some of the thoughts that we have, a couple of these slides are going to go over the different types of development. Mixed development is one that comes to mind when we're thinking about downtown, as some of the comments have mentioned. How do we create and help create Monessen in a place not only to enhance upon the infrastructure and the industry that's already there, but bring more industry in. Using mixed development allows for the creative use of spaces within vacant lots so that we can expand to use them for different means. It also allows you to kind of stack a bunch of different things on top of each other, such as business, retail, maybe some office and research space as well. Some of the things that we've discovered is the creation of a hub, which serves as retraining and advancement of local talent, has been super successful, one of which is the Launch Box in New Kensington. It's a great space where people can come to learn new skills, add new skills to the repertoire so that as industry changes, we can ensure that the local population is as competitive in gaining those jobs and being successful in those types of spaces. And it also allows for a balanced approach to enhancing economic activity while ensuring area affordability. Another main piece is affordable housing. As we consider, reinvestment within Monessen and how that can actually lead to population growth or more aspects to people coming in, we want to ensure that the residents that already live there can continue to live there and gain equity and also gain economic opportunity. So the idea is to ensure that we're creating naturally occurring affordable housing and also ensuring that the housing that continue through the aspects of repair and rebuild is still at affordable rates for people and residents that are living within the communities. So some of the categories of associated costs that need to be considered in relation to mixed development, as well as affordable housing, parcel acquisition, which refers to not only gaining private parcels and private property through the aspect of purchasing, but also ensuring that the deeds of these properties are cleaned. By having a clean deed, we can ensure that any investment that comes in will be good for that property, and you're not risking any aspect of financial burden upon people that are living there. Demolition, that's another major one. The county currently has the ACT funds that they can use towards demolition, but we need to figure out which properties are worth and need to be demolished versus which ones can be repaired. Permits and taxes, hard construction costs, and financial incentives. And these are kinds of incentives that Monessen can provide new local businesses or continuing businesses within the area, such as tax incentives, density bonuses, and understanding what the value of that is in comparison to what Monessen can actually offer. The other additional thing to consider is the green space construction. These are just a couple of different construction, but green can span a variety of different things, but some of the ones that might be beneficial is community managed open space, which designates zoning policy specific sites, allowing for certain spaces to be protected for the community use. Community gardens is another pretty effective one. There's benefits to the use of green infrastructure. It decreases probability of source system overflow, given the floodplain and consideration where Monessen is located. This could be beneficial in saving the city a lot of money, and it decreases capital construction costs. Some of, again, consider for development of green space, we have some of the similar ones: land acquisition, site development, equipment and materials, and maintenance and labor. And then the two different types of foundation and nonprofit, as well as governmental subsidies to consider. Different types of foundation and nonprofit support that would be required is training and education, especially in the aspect of green spaces. Produce might require some training, and there's a lot of great organizations that can produce that type of training so that we can ensure that these green spaces can continue on. They can also provide tools, materials, etc. Some grant funding for smaller projects such as art installations, beautification projects to kind of either make the downtown more kind of feasible for business investment. And then some governmental subsidies to consider. These are just PA governmental subsidies. There are other ones within the national, but given the fact that a lot of those national federal subsidies trickle down into these spots, this is a good place to start. The Department of Conservative and Natural Resources for greening based, the Department of Community and Economic Development, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, and PennVest for infrastructure. So moving forward, 4 questions, just moving forward, where we're going with this is an aspect of just understanding the community scope and need. We can then kind of allocate the different types of cost for each individual lot as we move forward. And then any questions you guys have on the financial planning strategies? Sure.
One quick question, Finn. Do you expect at the other end of the project have some suggestions from a state policy point of view on new programs or whatever that don't exist now? Or you've done a good job of identifying where some opportunities already lie, but you know, blight is not exclusively a Monessen issue for sure. And I suspect, particularly with the new administration, there may be an appetite for trying to come up with some more innovative strategies. Do you think focusing on Monessen, you may come up with some ideas along those lines?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there is potential there. The idea of using Monessen is just kind of as a case study in this implementation of new strategies. So we're hoping that one of the end results would be creating an aspect of a comprehensive plan that then can be replicated into other municipalities around the county and then potentially replicated elsewhere. But through that idea, we can identify different types of gap funding of, hey, these are the types of things that we're doing with vacant, abandoned, and vacant and abandoned properties that don't really have funding sources. We might need to actually build a funding source, and that would be super successful.
Example, and forgive me because Heinz was in my class, so she knows I'm kind of fixated on state policy. But you know, there was a home repair program implemented in last year's budget deliberations. What's little understood is it's not a statute. It was in the fiscal code, so it may or may not be repeated, but it's a program and an idea that was generated with a lot of enthusiasm among a number of legislators, and I think would be very appropriate, but it needs to be established in statute. But it's just one example of where the state can take an initiative that can leverage. And when I look at all that, and you know, one comment about Monessen, I'm fairly familiar with it. I lived across the river from it for a while. You know, you have a real division of that community because of the hill. You know, it's like two different cities. There's the city with all the industrial stuff in the downtown in it, and then there's the residential city, right? And I know those boundaries aren't exact, but they're pretty stark. And from the industrial standpoint, I think, and this goes back to the earlier part of the presentation as well, you really need to look at, I think, the opportunities that programs like redevelopment assistance capital program could provide to change the complexion of what's in that industrial section. So I'd really emphasize that too, as you look at it. You almost need an, I hesitate to say an industrial strategy. It doesn't have to be the traditional idea of industry, but a strategy for that part of the community versus the residential and housing part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. We want to build upon what Monessen already has, and it has a history in industry, and it seems like kind of bringing that back into the fold would be a great move forward. So looking into considerations of how we simultaneously rebuild and boost business while maintaining a lot of that industry legacy and bringing that back to the fold to create additional economic stimulus is a compelling and great idea. So we will definitely be putting in an aspect of also industrial investment and what that would look like.
I think Rick brings up a good point about state policy because, you know, I'm trying to find historical precedent for what our country as a whole is facing. Is you know, this is not just something that's in Monessen, as Rick had pointed out. One of the central questions that we're looking to at least illuminate or find some bit of examination in this process is, what do we do with all these vacant lots? You know, in Roman times, you know, those towns were they vanished in a way, right? But there's still a community here, and there's going to need to be some measure of land stewardship built into state policy to deal with all of these vacant lots. I would note on the whole homes program, one thing that I do like about it, the way the Department of Community and Economic Development set it up, it's not a competitive thing. So you know what you're working with. Westmoreland County's got $3.1-ish million to make investments. And we've committed to $1 million. And our focus is going to be on really like major building components. So roofs, gutters, downspouts, windows. In our observations, once those systems fail, it is a demo candidate, right? So if we can make investments in, say, 50 units, that would be a great thing. Now, 50 units across all of Westmoreland County, eesh, that's really spreading it thin. Our approach is going to be to ask our communities that have got the qualified census tracts. So Monessen's just one community, one of 7 that have got qualified census tracts. We're going to ask our communities especially to be pushing this program so that those communities that were simultaneously demolishing a lot of vacant buildings, we're seeing some investments in the ones that are still standing. So that's part of our approach. The other $2 million is going to be supplementing a lead safe housing program. So just to kind of give some greater context about what Westmoreland County is going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think considering we're almost over time, let's hear from Bobby. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Hello, everyone. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm unfortunately remote today, but I'll be talking about community engagement. I want to start by stressing that even though this is coming last in the order of our presentation today and is unfortunately getting a little shortchanged on time, this is by no means an afterthought or a low priority effort. This is where I think we're going to spend some of the most time and effort in our project. And I speak for our whole group when I say this is a really, really critical and prioritized part. So in our engagement with the Monessen community, our primary goals are to elevate the residential voices in planning for the future of the community of Monessen and make sure that any decisions that are made, any projects that are undertaken are not taken from a top-down approach, but really reflect the voice and vision of the community. As we go forth doing community engagement, we want to make sure that any data we collect is inclusive of all groups in the community. Even though we're only working with certain stakeholders, we want to make sure that the surveys we do, the people we talk to are really reflective and diverse and not prioritizing any one type of group of Monessen residents, because even though it's a relatively small community, it's still a very diverse and very dynamic community with many different priorities. We also want to, in all of our reporting and final work, contextualize and prioritize stakeholders' perspectives, including residents, business owners, municipal managers, everyone who has a really big investment in Monessen's future. And finally, as Hannah spoke to already, we want to embrace and normalize destigmatizing language. And that's a very deliberate choice and is going to reflect more our actions than it is anything that we're going to preach to people. We don't want to come into a community and tell them what language they can and can't use, but by choosing to be deliberate with our own language, we hope to normalize that way of thinking around language. In order to achieve these goals, we have a specific set of actions that we are already underway with. The first one is working with, learning from, meeting with people doing work on the ground in Monessen and other similar communities in Westmoreland County to leverage community assets, to take what these communities already have as great community benefits and assets and maximize their ability to enhance the community. So there's a lot of great people doing great work, and we want to make sure that anything we do and report on reflects and enhances that rather than tries to addend to that or is completely out of funk with that. We also want to partner with community leaders to conduct a community survey. I'll speak more to that on the next slide. We want to host an event this spring to demonstrate the benefits of various land recycling strategies to the community. So using existing lots in the downtown or residential areas of Monessen, show some of the possibilities so that our work is not entirely abstract, entirely verbal, but actually people can come out and experience and see, oh, you know what? I thought that sounded really nice, but when I went, it was kind of boring. What if we did this instead? Obviously, we can't demonstrate the whole range, but what we can do, we plan to do. And then most importantly, and finally, in our final report out, in our final out deliverables, we want to present findings that capture the holistic narrative of the community, that don't prioritize any one group of stakeholders, that don't essentially accomplish what we want to accomplish while ignoring what the community actually needs. So to speak more to that, we move to the next slide. I'll discuss the community survey that we're in the process of co-designing with community leaders. We're being very deliberate that this is not a survey that we are designing and conducting and kind of holding the data ourselves. This is a collaborative process that we are doing in conjunction with a wide group of community leaders in Monessen. So that co-designing takes several forms. In one form, it's literally writing the questions. So we're working with group members who are submitting questions that they want to hear. And then we're going to workshop together to finalize the list of questions. This is really important because these community members don't always have the opportunity to do surveys like this. And you don't want to just be constantly surveying community members and residents. So if we can achieve as many goals as possible with this survey in one go, then I think that's a really great outcome. With these same group members, we're exploring channels to distribute the survey across a broad cross-section of Monessen residents, make sure it's a diverse group. And as I said, really prioritizing in co-designing the questions so that the results of the survey are not just benefiting us and our project, but are benefiting all of the work being done on this in the community. And we're going to be deploying that after spring break in mid-March. That said, I'd like to entertain any questions anyone has about our community engagement strategy. All right.
This isn't a question, Bobby, but let me just say quickly, it would be great if the group consulted with the group that's doing the Monongahela project. They're sort of, I mean, they're different, but the emphasis is the same in terms of community engagement. And you're all in the same class, so I'll promote that. I'm not the advisor to that project, but it's a suggestion.
Yeah, and we're going to distribute it in many ways. You know, there'll be an online version, paper version that it's distributed at churches, community groups. So we're definitely looking at every channel possible to maximize engagement. Okay, I'll take the lack of remaining questions as a sign that everyone is ready to hang up on this call. So I'll pass it off to Hannah to
Right.
close this out.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much for staying a little bit over. We apologize for that. I know some new folks have joined. I'm Hannah. I'm just going to be wrapping up a little bit. I'm so proud of this group. We really have, with the completion of the survey mid-March, we've met all of our midterm goals. We have gone to Monessen. We've met with lots of amazing community leaders and saw the town for ourselves, which was really helpful. We have done a lot of really great work. Jada and Dennis have been reading so many pieces of great literature to try to make us the most informed researchers that we can possibly be. We've started amazing preliminary data analysis, and we are still working on this financial feasibility component that Dennis is focusing on. So we thank you so much for coming. Our final presentation, we'll send out an updated invitation when we know more, but we're wrapping up the week of May 1st. And so keep your eyes peeled for the final presentation. We want you to come back and hear the implementations that we've made based on your suggestions and comments today, which have been so helpful. So thank you so much. I want to have time for lingering questions. If you thought of something now that you wanted to pose, we would love to hear. But I also know that we're over, and that's valid as well. Can someone monitor the? Okay. Oh, yes, we can. Okay, yes, we can definitely get a recording.